Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We are here with the timely Torah, which is some ideas on the parasha, so that hopefully we can say something contemporary, relevant, and meaningful in a way that we can all benefit from. I'd like to share with you this morning a beautiful idea, and it takes place in the context of the story of Yosef and the birth of his children. I don't know if you've got to the end of davening in the morning, but if you get all the way through to the very end and you keep turning the pages even after the service has finished, you will encounter what's called the Shesh Zichronot, the 6 remembrances. This is a fascinating idea. If you take a look at the Torah, you will find that in 6 different places it says you must remember this event. In 6 different places it says you must remember this event. And authorities actually say that it's a mitzvah every day to remember these 6 remembrances. Are you familiar with this idea? It's an amazing idea. Do you know what the 6 are? Can you imagine? Can you think? Can you guess? Remember remember X, remember Y, Z. Let's go through them quickly. Zechirat Yetziat Mitzrayim, remember the Exodus of Egypt. Zechirat Ma'amad HaSinai, you can remember the revelation on Mount Sinai. Zechirat Mechiyat Amalek, you must remember the attack of Amalek and the command to blot out his memory. That already sounds interesting because it sounds like a contradiction. Zechirat Ma'aseh Ha'egel, we must remember the incident of the golden calf. Zechirat Ma'aseh Miriam, we must remember how Miriam spoke badly about her brother Moshe in the desert. And Zechirat Shabbat, to remember Shabbat. Okay, these are what we refer to as our 6 zichronot, remembrances. And anybody who has even the faintest inkling of some of the most fundamental, important ideas in Torah realizes that memory is indeed so central to us. And zechira, to remember memories of the past, it actually creates who we are today. For a person to understand who they are now is to explore the meaning of their past as they interpret those events through the lens of memory. Now, this could actually be quite dangerous. I remember reading once of an individual who won the competition for being able to have the greatest memory. He held the world record for the person who could recite off by heart the numerical decimal points following pi. 3.14 da 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 da. This individual, talented man, he could remember 30,000 decimal points. I don't know what the world record is today. I'm sure it's been broken. This was a long time ago, but amazingly, it's like boggles the imagination. This person could remember off by heart the decimal points following pi up to 30,000 numbers. And he was very talented, very, very brilliant. And in an interview in the newspaper, he said that he had a terribly troubling life. Why? Because throughout his life, he had never forgotten anything. He had an inability to forget. He had remembered literally everything that just happened, everything that had happened to him, as if it had just happened in that moment. And he walked around in his head with the most challenging aspects of his life, the previous traumas he had endured, the great challenges he had to face, the tragedies he had experienced, and they were right there in front of his eyes. sometimes we are not only a creation of our memory, but we are actually haunted by the negative associations that we can recall. Yosef has a son, and he names his son. And what does he name his child? His first child, Menashe. Menashe. Believe it or not, the word Menashe comes from the root to forget. And incredibly, I would like to read with you the verse. This is on your source sheet. If you're following in the Facebook Live, it's in the link. If you're watching this later with the Beth Tikva email. V'yikra Yosef et Shem HaBachor Menashe. Yosef calls the name of his firstborn son Menashe. Why? Ki nashani Elohim et kol amali ve'et kol beit avi. For God has made me forget completely my hardships and my parents' home. What an incredible verse. You are called Menashe because God has made me forget all of my childhood traumas. I remember Aviva Zornberg pointing out once in a class that I attended of hers that you don't need to be Sigmund Freud to realize that when a person is saying, I name my child for my childhood trauma that Baruch Hashem I have now forgotten, well, there's probably somewhat of a Freudian slip there that maybe you haven't forgotten them after all. And to the degree that a person tries to emphasize the sense of how they no longer remember these difficulties, there's probably a little inkling there that, believe it or not, you haven't left them indeed behind. Baruch Hashem, God has caused me to forget my toil and to forget my father's house. I now call you my firstborn son, Menashe. Putting Freud to one side, it's an astonishing statement because Yosef, of all people, knew how important it was for him to preserve everything that he had learned from his father's house. Yosef was so proud of his traditions. Yosef knew who he was as a Hebrew, and he never forgot that. And yet, paradoxically, here he is seemingly thanking God for enabling him to forget it all. I recall in a social context, I bumped into a person in our community who had very fond memories of somebody who had passed away. And I asked him, how are you doing? And his response back to me, how's it going? What's happening? How are you? His response back was, thank God for forgetfulness. And it stopped me in my tracks. It was such a powerful line. And of course, the person had fond memories of his loved one. And of course, he wanted to keep that person's legacy precious. And at the same time, he wanted to move on with his life. And I think that's exactly the point that Yosef is making when he calls his firstborn son Menashe. Yosef grew up in a dysfunctional family where he wasn't sure if his father truly favored him or wanted to jeopardize him. He shared his dreams with his father. His father scolded him. At a time when he knew that his father appreciated the relationship with the brothers was not going well, his father sent him into the lion's den to go and check on them. Was his father a supporter or an agitator? Yosef was an individual that, not being the 11th in line, he had dreams of grandeur that raised the ire of his brothers. They were so jealous of him and they hated him. And let us recall that he grows up without a mother, because from the age of 6, the commentators say that when Binyamin was born and Rachel died in childbirth, Yosef was approximately 6 years old. This was a person with somewhat of a confused, ambiguous father, with brothers who hated him, with no mother to raise him. And from the age of 17, he is abandoned and estranged from his family. Yosef's childhood is a complicated one. And here he is now in Egypt, and he's trying to put his troubled home behind him. How is he going to do that? How does he say goodbye to the past? And I believe with the naming of his firstborn son, Menashe, what he's trying to do is say, it's my turn now to have a family of my own. Forget my own dysfunctions of my youth. Forget how the family that I was raised in didn't work. I'm now a leader in Egyptian society. I'm now having my own children. Baruch Hashem, I'm not living with the pain constantly that I used to once grow up with. Thankfully, I have endured the suffering from my father's house, and now it's time for me to put those experiences behind me. I name you Menashe because God has allowed me to carry on living my life without the trauma of the past. And from Yosef, we learn just how important it is to remember the past, absolutely, to cherish the experiences in our personal lives, in our national lives. And yet we learn from Yosef how important it is to channel our memories in a future-orientated way to allow us to thrive into the future. We can declare, like Yosef, thank God for forgetfulness. There are times it's a bracha. Thank God I can forget, because what it allows me to do is continue on into tomorrow. This was an idea for today. I hope it gives you food for thought and certainly cause to reflect and pause in your own life about what it is that you remember, what you're trying to forget, and how you can move on into the future. Have a great day, everybody. Last day of Hanukkah tonight, Thursday the 17th, and a happy Hanukkah and an early Shabbat Shalom.